Stephen Bowden is a Charleston County public defender who lives in West Ashley and loves District 10. Now he wants to represent District 10 on Charleston City Council. I speak exclusively with Stephen for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook.
Stephen Bowden, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. I appreciate you letting me be here with you today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I understand that obviously you are a Charleston County public defender. You live in Shadowmoss. You have a wife. And now you are a candidate for Charleston City Council's District 10 seat. Let me ask you this, Stephen. Why Stephen Bowden? Why now?
Sure. And I think that's the question, right? Most importantly, I'm running because West Ashley can't, the next 4 years are too important to Charleston's future to waste time with more political games. You know, West Ashley is facing unprecedented challenges from flooding and traffic. And these issues are only going to get worse as sea levels continue to rise, storms get bigger and worse, and you know, some new developments come online that are going to put more cars on the road. So District 10 really needs a leader who is dedicated to service, who can help protect our homes from flooding, who can help shorten our commutes that rob us of our quality of life, and who can make government work for us.
What are those political games that you see on City Council?
You know, unfortunately, a resident of District 10 or really anybody in Charleston is much more likely to read about Councilman Griffin's latest controversy or culture war than about the good things that government is doing to help people. And I think that's what we deserve to read about. You know, we have very real challenges. And, you know, a very minor tax increase to make sure that police continue showing up when we call, or the fire department shows up when we call, or our potholes get filled, is serious work for serious people. And I don't think that's what I don't think we've seen it treated that way over the last 4 years. And I think that's what our neighbors deserve.
Now, what exactly has Mr. Councilman, as far as Harry Griffin, what has he done good in your mind?
What has he done good? You know, it's all overshadowed by the bad is the real problem. You know, I think Mayor Tecklenburg is doing an excellent job. I think the rest of council is on board with helping him solve the city's problems. And then there's one notable exception every time. You know, so we could talk about the good things Charleston is doing, and then it gets overshadowed by, you know, somebody who won't even vote for a common sense solution like a mask ordinance. You know, the city has has already allocated about $500,000 for design services for a project that's going to help flooding in Church Creek. And again, we can't read about that because we're reading about this rally downtown with extremist groups. And so we don't ever get to the good because it is constantly overshadowed by the bad. And residents out here, you know, like I said, have real problems and deserve a leader who can stay out of the headlines, can stay out of the way, can do the work without caring who gets the credit. And that's the kind of leader I'll be. And I think my, you know, service to the community with the Public Defender's Office, you know, shows that I care about this community, number one, but more importantly, that I'm a problem solver.
But what qualifies you to be on Charleston City Council?
Sure. Well, you know, as a public defender, Quintin, everybody might not know this, but you know, the primary job is to represent people who are accused of crimes and can't afford to hire a private attorney. But that's only one part of the job. You know, I spend a lot of my time identifying the problems that lead people to commit crimes in the first place. You know, things like homelessness, things like the mental health crisis that our community faces, things like drug addiction. And I spend so much of my time addressing those problems, getting people into stable housing, getting people into drug rehab, helping make sure that they have access to the medicine that they need, and that somebody is going to get them to take it. And I think all of these things show that I'm not new to this. Just because I haven't been on the political scene before doesn't mean I'm new to helping people with the problems that they have in our community. And that's the kind of experience that I want to bring to City Council.
Speaking of time, how long have you lived in District 10?
I've lived in District 10 since 2018.
How did your relationship begin with the constituents of District 10?
Well, it's walking out my front door and saying hey to my neighbors. It's playing golf at Shadowmoss Plantation Golf Course. It's going to some of the great restaurants and things that we have around here. So it's a casual relationship right now. It's certainly not a business relationship. But I want to bring my experience in solving problems in our community to solving my neighbors' problems.
Dan, how do you define quality of life in District 10?
So quality of life, it starts with fixing problems like flooding that threaten our ability to live here. So I live on one of the streets in Shadowmoss that floods the worst. When people saw all those pictures in 2015, 2016 from the big floods, that's my street. One of my neighbors' homes was bought out and torn down by the city because it flooded too often. And so there is no quality of life if we don't have a life here. And so part of it is addressing flooding so that every time a storm is coming in the Atlantic, you don't feel that anxiety coming up, like, will my home be here after this storm makes its way through? And it's problems like traffic, that really, absolutely rob us of our quality of life if we're, sitting an hour and a half, 2 hours commuting to and from work. That's time that we should be able to have with our families, with our neighbors, with our friends, that we're just not getting right now.
And obviously another particular problem right now in your district and around the city is growth. How can you ensure growth with smart growth in District 10?
So it's lending my voice to alert people to the development of the coming. Part of the problem, I think, is that Councilman Griffin has gotten so wrapped up in his culture wars that he forgets that the primary job of City Council is service to the community. I believe that that we have got to stay focused on some of these projects that are coming and not be cheerleaders for things like the Long Savannah project. There's a project right now they're pouring concrete in our wetlands as you and I are speaking here in Shadowmoss called the Middleborough condominiums that Councilman Griffin supported as well. He's even supported a carve out to the building moratorium to allow those projects. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. You were going to bring me back to my original question that I wanted to ask, because you talk about traffic. What is your 5-point plan for the Bees Ferry corridor for the next 5 to 10 years?
I don't know if it's a 5-point plan, Quintin, and the reason for that is because the City Council and the city don't have a ton of authority over building more infrastructure. But so things like the completion of 526, the extension of Glen McConnell, these are things that have got to happen, but we've got to rely on the county and state partners to accomplish those goals. And I'll be an active voice in supporting those, but it's really important to focus on things that aren't simply building infrastructure, right? So it's increasing walkability in our communities. It's increasing bikeability. It is making sure that the infrastructure we have is fit to drive on. So it's filling potholes and doing the simple things that residents are bringing to our attention. And then it's keeping quite as many cars off the road at rush hour. I think we've all seen during the pandemic that traffic has decreased because people are working from home. To some extent, I think we've got to continue that if it's not hurting, employers' productivity. I think we've got to incentivize employers to allow employees to work from And that's an easy thing that we can do without building more infrastructure and relying on somewhat unreliable partners that have we can see it with the 526 saga. Just because they're talking about building a road doesn't mean it ever gets built. And so we need to look inward at what we can do to solve some of these problems.
But when you go back to the Bees Ferry corridor, what is your comprehensive plan for that?
So, one big project that is talked about is extending Glen McConnell. There's other things that can be done, like optimizing, our traffic lights and those sorts of things. But really, extending Glen McConnell would be such a massive improvement for our community because Highway 61 wouldn't be quite as clogged. And so people who aren't trying to go to and from like Somerville could just shoot right up 61 if more of those cars get diverted, not through Shadowmoss, not on Bees Ferry, but just straight, down Glen McConnell. And I think these are things that have really got to happen quickly because, North Charleston's annexing some land up 61. There's huge developments planned out that way. Just right here by Shadowmoss, the Long Savannah project is going to come online before too long. We're talking about, hundreds of thousands of houses that are going to be built with, new people on the roads. So these are things that can't be delayed. And we've got to push our partners to do that. We've got to be looking for grants. Certainly hope we get some new infrastructure funding from the federal government here pretty soon. And then I think, we'll be in a good place to tackle some of these. But we've got to be doing the work on our end as well.
What is your plan for connectivity in District 10?
So it's simple things, Quintin. It's like when I'm walking my dog in the neighborhood, all of a sudden a sidewalk just ends, right? We need to be requiring developers to build sidewalks. I mean, as simple as things like that sound, they make a huge difference in the daily lives of people. There's the new developments in West Ashley Circle that are great. My wife and I bike there all the time, and eat in some of those restaurants. This is a plan that the West Ashley Revitalization Commission is working on, and I wholeheartedly support what they're doing. I'm really excited about being able to drive to Citadel Mall when all that development is completed, and we'll have this mixed use area that is going to be great for especially people who are going to live over there. They'll have everything. They'll have jobs. They'll have restaurants and parks and their housing all within a limited area. So not everybody has to go downtown when we want to do something. People can stay right here in West Ashley, and I think that will help with some of the traffic as well. And a lot of this is just requiring developers to do their part to make sure that the people who already live here are getting the best Charleston that we can live in.
Now, you talk about most of those sidewalks ending in your neighborhood. How many sidewalks should be added in District 10 right now?
I mean, I just think that they've all got to be connected. And it's a hard project going back and adding sidewalks later because that's land that people own. So we would have to negotiate with every individual homeowner to go paving through their land. Maybe some people might like it, but ultimately it's going to cost money. You can't just get an easement onto somebody's property to do something like that for nothing. And so it might not be feasible to go redo what's already the mistakes that have already been made. So I think a lot of this is forward looking. And so in a perhaps unified development ordinance that the city could pass, this is something that could be required of developers who are interested in making a buck off of our community.
Now, you talked a lot about Glen McConnell thus far. As you know, the South Carolina Department of Transportation is currently working on several projects that will affect District 10. This will be a project that adds a flyover at McBride and Glen McConnell, as you know, and most people think this is crucial, but also adding a flyover is crucial to a lot of people that I talk to, going back towards 526 from Glen McConnell. The 526 corridor project, which is part of Charleston County's plan, is a billion-plus project, and adding the second flyover will cost approximately $20 million, but some residents say it is much needed. Why is a flyover crucial in your mind?
Well, that intersection is a huge bottleneck. I work downtown at the courthouse, so I'm driving through that area every day. Generally I try to avoid rush hour because it's so bad. And so something like that where we could bypass where a lot of people are trying to go to. Chick-fil-A is a huge attraction right there, and these sorts of things, where we can just shoot straight through there to our homes rather than getting caught up in some of the more local type traffic, is huge. But like I said, our state and county partners haven't always been terribly reliable. So I don't think that we can bank on that, on those projects happening.
And let me ask you this. Obviously, this is a Charleston County project, but where should the $20 million come from the flyover in your mind?
You're gonna have to get creative to raise that kind of money. Some of that money will be coming back when the pandemic's over, demand increases. We can recoup some of these tax revenues that are being lost right now. But I think a lot of it's got to come from developers, and they will complain that this is going to put them out of business and they're not going to be able to build here. And how many times have they lodged those complaints and then they end up building here anyway? They're going to make money, and I think that the residents of Charleston and Charleston County are entitled to some of that. They shouldn't get something for nothing. That's going to be a big part of the obligation of government going forward, not to be best friends with the developers and to ask them to pay their fair share, so that we can ensure that Charleston is a resilient coastal community going into the future, and it's somewhere that my kids will be able to grow up.
And where are the demand increases in District 10?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Where are the demand increases in District 10?
Really they're all over. We can ask for more things from developers and all the projects that we've already got planned, but they're building everywhere out here. I mean, it's shocking to read about some of the plans. And so, anything that connects us to downtown is going to get strained. And so, those are the things that we are absolutely in our right to ask developers to pay for.
In December of 2020, the Charleston City Council approved a budget that actually included a tax increase for residents. The city of Charleston is expected to get nearly $21 million, that is, through the local municipality portion of the latest stimulus package. Would you be in favor of rolling back that tax increase before Charleston County released the next round of tax bills in this fall?
Absolutely, and that's really the promise that City Council made to residents when they passed that. They tried to do everything they could, short of cutting vital services like police and fire, and putting off needed projects to lower that tax increase as much as possible. And frankly, it's modest, but increasing taxes during a recession, a pandemic, is nobody's first choice. And we ought to recognize that is a burden on taxpayers, and I think that they do recognize that, and I'd be fully supportive of rolling that back as long as we can make sure that we're still guaranteeing, like I said earlier, that the police show up when you call, that the fire department shows up when you call, and there were a lot of theatrics around that budget increase that I think caused people to believe that, or the tax increase that caused people to believe that it's a lot more money than what it actually is. But if we can, pull back from it and not sacrifice those services, I think that's critical to do. To maintain trust with the community, because that's something that was promised.
What do you believe when it comes to this budget increase?
I think the tax increase that went through was necessary, even if it's not my first choice. I feel like I pay enough taxes, but if it means that we don't have to defund the police, then it's valuable, and it's needed. And so, if I was on city council, I would have voted for it, and I would have gone to every one of my neighbors, and I would have sold it as exactly what it was. Nothing, no hyperbole, no theatrics. I would just tell them that it was necessary. There was simply no other way. And that the budget had been cut as much as it could be without just absolutely taking a machete to it and causing you to lose out on valuable services that you've come to rely on. And so I would have voted for it, and I absolutely would vote to roll it back with the money that's coming from the federal government.
How would you amend the 2021 budget without a tax increase?
It's a good question, because we don't know what the revenues are going to be like going forward. Like I said, I would have voted in favor of the budget with a very modest tax increase, exactly like it was, making the exact promises that that Mayor Tecklenburg and others on City Council did. And so I think it strikes the right balance. Now going forward, I know you walk around downtown. I see the bachelorette parties coming back and the tourists back downtown. Almost to what seems like pre-pandemic levels. So I think some of these problems with the budget are going to sort of take care of themselves as some of this pent-up demand is unleashed, and people like me and my wife who really haven't eaten inside of restaurants for about a year now can go back and happily add that tax at the end of that bill, to pay what we owe and be good citizens and help out the community. And so, like I said, I think a lot of these problems will take care of themselves going forward. But tough choices may need to be made, and we need serious service-minded people to make them, and not turn it into some culture war issue, but explain it as exactly what it is.
What is the city's current operating budget?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
What are the last figures for the population for the city of Charleston?
Those are delayed with the census data. Although I did see some interesting figures. I believe it was a journalist with the Post and Courier was posting them on Twitter about where people are moving to, the race of the people that are moving there, and what we can see from those things is serious gentrification occurring in our community, and I'm extremely concerned about what we see occurring on the peninsula, especially. I think we run the risk of losing what makes Charleston so special, and we have got to preserve some of these neighborhoods downtown, not price out the people who live there currently. And make sure that we are dedicated to affordable housing, so that if someone is displaced, let's say from where they live right now, let's say maybe the East Side, that there is another option in Charleston, so that they're not entirely leaving the community. And I think that's critical to accomplish, to make sure that we can be the community that we are moving into the future.
Let me get back to District 10, though. How diverse is the economy for District 10?
it is diversifying. District 10 is very suburban. Most people who live here don't work here. They work downtown or at Boeing or something like that. But there are businesses that are cropping up right now. That's important because there is a TIF district that reserves some of the tax funding for our area to help with flooding. And so there's businesses that West Ashley Circle's cropping up. There's a new Lowe's where the Bilo used to be, and so we're diversified. It'll always be a suburb, and it should. But with asking developers to do what needs to be done to increase walkability in our community, I think we'll see more local businesses popping up. Hopefully people who live right here in the district. And I think that'll be wonderful things for everybody here in the community to enjoy.
What new business revenue would you help the District 10 create?
I would pound the pavement and talk to business owners and see what they need from government in order to start up here. And so I hope it would be something like more restaurants, so we don't have to go downtown. Sort of some not chain businesses so much. What I'd really like to see are local businesses. Almost like a District 10 version of Avondale.
Okay.
I think that's a good model for an area that we can enjoy and be proud of.
You talked earlier about Church Creek throughout the initial portion of this particular interview. Let me talk to you about the former Church Creek Piggly Wiggly parcel. How do you hope this particular parcel will bring relief to the Church Creek drainage basin?
Well, I hope it'll be green space. I hope that it won't be, ultimately what it looks like it could become, gas stations and fast food. We don't need that. We don't need more concrete in places that are in that much proximity to where we know the flooding occurs. And so I think we ought to preserve that as green space. A park that citizens can enjoy, and do what we're doing with some of the other green space throughout District 10. Which is figuring out how to maximize drainage in those areas and use it as a model that even individual homeowners can implement on their own properties, potentially for a tax incentive. And that's something that's in the plans going forward, and I think that would be a perfect area for us to expand that. And that's something we have to work with the county on.
How many people have sold their homes in District 10 and moved out of the district in the past 5 years?
I see for sale signs all the time, but I think it's an area that's growing, and I think it's an area that's going to continue to grow. And the challenge is going to be keeping it affordable here. Making sure that the infrastructure we have isn't overburdened, and most importantly, making sure that it doesn't contribute to the flooding. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, is the infrastructure overburdened right now?
Absolutely, and it's not even a question. And anybody who is on Glen McConnell, around 8 a.m. on a weekday, can tell you that it's overburdened. We see the wear and tear on the streets, even just from the number of cars that are on the road. And helping solve these problems, like I said earlier, doesn't necessarily mean building new infrastructure, but that's got to be part of the puzzle. Because our infrastructure is absolutely overburdened, and that means roads. That means our drainage infrastructure, and really we don't have a whole lot of rec space out here to take advantage of, and that's something that I'd want to look forward to earlier or as well.
And let me get back to the Church Creek NFWF Renaturalization, Habitat Restoration, and Protection Project. What is the total project budget for this particular project?
I'm not sure what the total budget is, but I have seen a design bid go out that I believe it was $495,000 that was allocated for that, and part of that bid included looking at like a infrastructure bank and other funding solutions. So I don't know what the cost is ultimately going to be for that, but it should include some portions of the scope of work that help it to find the funding necessary.
And that's my next question. Do you know what the drainage funds total will probably be right now?
No, but hopefully we're moving through it on projects. I watch these city council meetings every couple of weeks, and Matt Fountain, the stormwater director, gets on there and talks about all these awesome things that the city has going on. And so the city is on top of these. The city is putting the money in the projects to good use. So it's a matter of having an effective city councilman out here who can make sure that we're getting our slice of the pie without alienating and without creating divisions in our community, because it's not West Ashley versus downtown. We're all in this together. We are all going to sink or swim together. And I will be that effective voice and lead cheerleader for Matt Fountain during those updates and taking those things to the community. And again, avoiding just the negative headlines we've seen and letting our residents know that there are people who care about this community on city council doing the people's work, making government work for us, and solving the very real problems that people have.
Let me get back to the NFW grant. Do you foresee this project budget to be expended over the next few years?
Yeah, that's one of the things we can see from the 526 saga as well, is that every time you talk about a project and it doesn't get done, the budget ends up going up. So I imagine that there will be some revisions, a change order that increases the price a little bit. Luckily, we do have that grant to help offset some of those costs, and I think that's a wonderful thing that we can rely on. And if the cost does go up and it's nobody's fault, it's just materials increase or those sorts of things, we got to pay it, right? And these are necessary projects. So if that happens, we'll be on top of it certainly. But part of making government work for us is making sure that we don't have these incredibly unforeseen costs. And I think the stormwater department has seen that in other projects in the city. King and Hugie drainage, for example, is ended up being a big cost overrun. But I think that I believe that they're on top of it, and I don't foresee massive increases in the budgetary costs of those.
And do you by chance know how much money is actually coming from the NFWF grant by chance?
I don't off the top of my head. I'm more than happy to look into it and send you that, but yeah.
Okay. And in District 10, a large portion of homes are run along the Church Creek Basin, as you know. Have you been able to visit the watershed recently?
Absolutely. I live in the watershed. I love West Ashley Park out here. Goes right by it. I plan on talking to some experts in the future to make sure that to make sure that I plan to be doing everything that we can do to address some of these issues. I'm working with somebody right now who's sort of doing some drone footage so that we can take a look at the Church Creek drainage basin and see what needs to be done. But we also know what needs to be done. We have these big, expensive studies like the Dutch Dialogues. They have incredible maps in them that I really enjoy looking at and thinking about. And so we know what needs to be done. So now it's just a matter of serious people who want to implement that and will put in the work and not care who gets the credit. And that's the type of leader that I intend to be.
Where in District 10 do drains and ditches need to be cleaned out right now?
Right now, if you ever play golf at Shadowmoss, you could see some of these big ditches that are overgrown, and I think part of that is figuring out who owns some of this stuff, and getting the necessary access to clean it out. But the city is doing good work to clean out some of these things. So it's a matter of listening to residents right now who, these things run through their backyards, and they know better than anybody else when trash is accumulating there, when it's becoming overgrown. I see these complaints in our neighborhood Facebook group all the time. And so, I couldn't give you the addresses right now, but, just, hearing from those people or walking my dog through the neighborhood, it's easy enough to identify the ditches that need to get cleared out. And really it's all of our ditches that need to be maintained. And I do think the city's made a big step forward in doing that with a regular maintenance schedule. And I think Shadowmoss is actually up here pretty soon.
I know you talked earlier about FEMA. FEMA is currently buying out houses like the ones in Bridgepoint and Shadowmoss because they filed claims for flood damage upwards of 5 to 6 times reportedly. What planning practices do you approve of right now?
Well, there's talk with the city going on right now about the so-called cluster development ordinance, which is much better than it sounds. And it's an effort to bring development into alignment with some of the environmental practices that we know are necessary. So preserving green space where there's development. One thing that the city's got to take a good, long, hard look at is zoning. It would just be drawing red lines around areas that we know are never going to be suitable for development, no matter what steps the developer takes to mitigate the drainage in that area, or no matter what the city requires the developer to do. So that's a hard conversation. It's a long conversation. And it's not easy. And so I think, that's why certain politicians don't necessarily want to do it. But it's a necessary one. And I think that is sort of the big hurdle, or the big next step, is being clear about where we should have development and where we shouldn't. In addition to when we do have new development, making sure that it is sort of the best practices in maximizing how we live with water.
And how will these FEMA projects impact the residents in District 10 years from now?
Hopefully it's going to be a big boost to us, because it's, I mentioned to you earlier that my neighbor's house was torn down in that project. And that's still green space, and I'm glad about that. And part of that grant work that you talked about earlier is going to be installing some drainage there, and using it as a model for what individual homeowners can do on their own property to store and divert water. But unfortunately, it's not all good news, because we see what happened in Bridgepoint with those townhomes, and not 300-400 yards away, there are new condos being built, and we've gotten some answers from the engineers of that work for that developer, who say that they've got a plan for this, and they plan to store all this extra water. But anybody with eyeballs can see that they're tearing down trees, that area is particularly wet to begin with. We know that, that the Bridgepoint townhomes were just torn down for exacerbating flooding. And so we've got to stop disastrous projects like that. And that's a project that Councilman Griffin supported, and I think we need answers for what was the thought there. I think we just need a little bit more common sense, and somebody who's dedicated to serving the community, to take a long, hard look at these things and have the tough conversations.
How do you assess Phil and Bill?
So I don't think there's anybody who supports quote unquote Phil and Bill. I think it means different things to each person. So what I think of when I think of Phil and Bill is finding an area that is not suitable for development and bringing in dump trucks full of fill to try to make it suitable for development. And that's what I talked about with the zoning issue. We have just got to look at areas that are not suitable for development, never will be suitable for development, and prevent development there. Just make it clear that the policy of the city of Charleston is that there will never be building here ever. This is green space. What I think it's come to mean to some people is no development ever. And I don't think that's necessarily the right approach. We just need smarter development. And, fill can be used for roads. And if you listen to the conversation that they had at the city council meeting about this, several weeks ago, there are real unintended consequences with just an outright ban on fill and build. Using fill to level a property is not the same thing as using fill to build in an area that's completely unsuitable for development. And so I think we need to be a little bit more precise in how we use that. I don't think it's this exciting political rallying cry. I think it's a serious policy issue. And I think we need to be listening to the experts who tell us where it is appropriate, where it isn't appropriate, the use of fill, not, fill and build, and implement and really revise the stormwater regulations where it makes sense. And like I said, there's a very capable leader of the stormwater department right now who's really on top of that. So what I don't think that we need are politicians kind of stepping all over that with politically popular ideas. I think we need the experts to win the day on that issue.
How many FEMA homes have been built that should not have been built in Shadowmoss?
Well, I know that they tore down. I think it's 4 homes right over in my section of Shadowmoss, in addition to the Bridgepoint townhomes. I think they're done with that process of identifying homes and buying them out and tearing them down for now, at least. So I don't have an exact figure, but I'm happy that it's been done and that we've got this new green space that hopefully will stay that way forever, and provide just a little bit more of a buffer when the next storm comes.
The average developer is building how many homes right now in District 10?
I don't know what the average would be, but I know the Long Savannah project, for example, is hundreds and hundreds of homes. Projects up further up 61 in the area that North Charleston is annexing. Again, those are massive developments. So we're not talking about just adding a few homes. We're talking about adding entire new communities. And anybody who's watched any sort of building in Charleston knows what kind of development this is going to be, and it's where they throw the homes up basically overnight. And we're not going to have a chance to know what the consequences of those developments are until it's too late. And so I think we've got to go in a more deliberate fashion, sort of smaller neighborhood by smaller neighborhood, area by area, and paying attention to what the consequences are, not just what we hope that they will be.
Now, let me turn over to the election. Obviously, you will face, Harry Griffin in November, along with, I believe, Eric Pullman as well. But let me ask you this. I know that obviously, too, you're a Charleston County public defender, so you're all about ethics. But will you accept the Livability PAC's endorsement if they endorse your campaign?
Of course, I think that is, I think that's a sought after endorsement, and it ought to be, because that is a group that seeks to protect residents, and that's ultimately what the job of city council is. So I would be proud to have their seal of approval, and I would actively tell voters that is that this is a group that has our best interests at heart. This isn't just another special interest, and so yes, I would absolutely welcome.
And I know you talked a lot about Mayor Tecklenburg throughout this interview. What is your analysis of his performance over the past 4.5 years?
I think Mayor Tecklenburg is doing a great job. I think he's focused on the real problems. When he had his State of the City address and identified flooding as public enemy number one, I think he hit the nail on the head, because flooding is the issue that will determine whether when my wife and I have kids, whether they get to grow up in Charleston. And so I think he and I share the same goal, which is creating the most resilient coastal community in the world. A community that coastal cities all over the world can look at as an example of how to tackle their drainage like we do now with Amsterdam. And I think he's focused on making sure I don't have to take a gondola downtown, and I think that's certainly to his credit.
You talked earlier about the political games, and obviously, as you know, and it's very public, that Mr. Griffin has been in trouble recently. If you were in city council right now, would you have censured him?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a big debate right now over the code of conduct that the city's trying to implement. I'm an attorney, and we have our own ethical rules. And it's shocking to me when I see a profession, like the folks on city council, who really, as long as they're not, violating any criminal statutes, they can't be punished or removed. I think that we have got to draw a very bright line about what conduct is acceptable from city council members and what conduct is not. And I can assure you that, it's really unfortunate that we're even having this conversation right now, because it shows the depth of the problem that Councilman Griffin creates. I will assure you that nobody will ever have questions about the groups that I'm associating with or what's in my heart. I will speak with a clear voice, and I will live up to my own, code of ethics and code of morals, first and foremost.
Now, to be fair, also, Charleston City Council member Carl Brady was arrested for alleged DUI last year. If you were on City Council today, would you have censured him as well?
There's a criminal process in place. I don't know, whether he was convicted of that or what. I do think it'd be important to wait until there's a conviction. That's just sort of that's sort of in my bones as a public defender. Is there's a process in place. We've got to let the process work. If he's convicted of that, I think it's something that's worth looking at. If it's I don't want to speak too much to his situation, because I don't really know what's going on with it. But I will say that and I'm sure that he knows this. Drunken driving is a real problem in our community. We see people die every year, and so it's something that the city's dedicated resources to clearing the court system's backlog of DUI cases, because it's important that we adjudicate those, and that the criminal process gets its say and doles out the punishment or the sort of the treatment requirements that it thinks are necessary. And so I would take a long, hard look at what the court system did. But we've got to condemn that sort of behavior, certainly.
Now, obviously, as you know, council members Jason Saccharin and obviously Carol Jackson signed a petition to remove Mr. Griffin, that is, from city council. Would you have censured them if you were on council today?
No, and I signed that petition as well. I think it was brave of them to take a stand, and let somebody that they serve with, one of their colleagues, know that they vehemently disapprove of not only the groups that he was associating with, some of the horrendous things that those groups stood for. I was watching a Live 5 reporters live stream on Facebook during that event in December, and I heard people chanting "White Lives Matter" during that rally. We know what they're saying, and it's to the exclusion of Black Lives Mattering. And so it was very brave of Councilman Saccharin and Councilman Jackson to voice their displeasure with Councilman Griffin. And I stand there right there in solidarity with them. Sorry, go ahead.
And in regards to those riots that happened this past summer, where were you emotionally? Should something have taken place as far as on city council, as far as making certain that there's no violence in this city whatsoever?
Sure. I'll say first of all that my heart was broken in what led up to those protests in the first place. The George Floyd video. I watch a lot of body camera video in my job, and I still have the capacity to have my breath taken away by something that horrible. I don't know that there's anything city council could do to prevent that sort of event in the future. Unfortunately, it is an outpouring of emotion, and unfortunately, it obviously got out of hand. But I think we can be satisfied that it was only a very few bad actors that caused any sort of property destruction or violence. Thousands of people took part in that protest that day and were entirely peaceful. And those people had basically gone home by the time things escalated. So, I don't think government needs to have this knee-jerk reaction when we see something upsetting that happens. People violated the law, and those people are going to be held to account in state and federal court. And I think that's enough. I think we've got the criminal process in place to deter that sort of behavior for the future and hold the people who took part in it accountable.
But then, what's your closing argument of the May riots?
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. It put business owners in a position that they never should have been in, and that is, going to put their livelihoods back together, with fires and shattered glass and water damage and all sorts of things. But I went down there the next morning, Quintin. My wife and I went down there because we were so moved by what we saw the night before that we wanted to help those property owners clean up. And the most incredible thing happened by the time we got down there at 7:30 a.m.
Right.
There were already thousands of people on the street.
Right.
And we can talk about how horrible the riot was, but I think what we should focus more on is how incredible the community's response was to it. You don't fight darkness with more darkness, right? You shine a light on it. And I think that's what the community did in going out there with gloves and brooms and trash bags and helping people put their lives back together. If there's anything that city council should be doing, it's supporting those property owners, with short-term loans or those sorts of things to make sure that they can stay afloat. It's obviously all sort of past tense now, but while they're waiting for insurance or whatever else is going to help them, cover some of those losses.
If you were in court today, how would you defend the Charleston Police Department when it comes to the May riots?
They were unprepared. Is the simple fact, Quintin, and they put out a report themselves that said that. so I don't think it necessarily needs a defense, although I'm more than happy to mount a defense. It's just being prepared the next time we see something similar. And unfortunately, I don't know that there's been reform that prevents something like that from happening again somewhere in our country and seeing more protests. So I think it's something that we should anticipate. We need a plan in place for the next time, one of these awful videos comes out, and so that, residents in our city know that we've got their back when they're hurting from seeing one of these videos, that they know that, they can go downtown and they can march on King Street and they can let their voices be heard. But they also need to know that the city police department and I think Chief Reynolds is doing a great job with the department. I really do. But this was an unexpected event, and it's no longer unexpected the next time. And so, we've got to have a plan in place for the next time something like this happens, just like we've got to have a plan in place for the next time a hurricane happens. These events are inevitable and have to be planned for.
Stephen Bowden, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Quintin, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.